E me hanga tuku whare. O papatua nuku ki paparahi. Ko ngā maunga ngā paupau. Ko ranginui titirui honei te tūnui. Pūhanga tohora titiro ki te ramaroa. E whakakuru pai akira o te haua uru. Te ramaroa titiro ki whiria. Te paika o te riri. Te karoa rāhiri. Whiria titiro ki pāmuru pāpata. Pāmuru pāpata. Titiro ki maunga tapu. Maunga taniwha. Maunga taniwha titiro ki tōkerau. Tōkerau titiro ki rākau mangamanga. Rākau mangamanga titiro ki manaia. E tū kohatu mai rā i te ako. Manaia titiro ki tūtāmoi. Tūtāmoi titiro ki maunganui. Maunganui titiro ki puhanga tohora. Ko te whare tapu o ngā pui tēnei dihei wā mauri ora. Ka rere te mihi ki a rātou kua whiturangi tia. Ko kingi tūheitia, haere atu rā. Ki te mana whenua, kaitahu kāti māmoi, wai taha. Nei te mihi ki a koutou. Ki a koutou kua tai mai nei. I ngā mano, i ngā rahi, i ngā raurangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Katoa he māngai mo te whānau Theodore. Hei tīmata, hei whakatau, i tēnei whakanui o te wahine tō, no ngā pui, no te aroa hoki. Ka kaka ngā pūriri o tae mai i tēnei wā. I muri te kōrero i tīmatanga, me karakia. Ka ino i tātou. E tō mātou matu i te rangi, kia tā pūtō ingoa, kia tae mai tau rangitīratanga, kia me te tau e pai ai ki uru i te whenua, kia ki te anō ki tō te rangi. O mai kia mātou ai nei, e tau ngā mātou mō tēnei rā, muru o mātou hara, me mātou hoki muru nei, i te hunga i haranga ki a mātou. O hoki mātou e kawea kia whakawaia, engāri whakaorangi a mātou i te kino. No hoki te rangatiratanga, te kaha, me te kuru orea, ake, āmune. Nō e ka wai ka tātou i te himene he hōnare, e tū tātou.
O tēnā koe Reuben, tēnā tātou katoa, ki te whare e tūnei, te papa e tāko tōnei, rau rangatira mā tēnā koutou. Ki ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohi me ngā uri whakahiki tēnei rā kāmihi. Tēnei au te paukoko Māori o tākou whakaihu waka he mihi atu nei ki a koutou, nau mai whakatau mai ki ora mai tātou katoa. So I am Jacinta Ruru, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Māori here at the University of Otago. And so on behalf of the senior leadership team, I welcome you all here this evening for this very special event to mark and celebrate the promotion of Professor Moana Theodore to our highest academic position. He mihi nui kia koe e hoa. So I acknowledge all our colleagues and visitors here in person and those online who are gathered together to celebrate all Professor Moana Theodore has achieved in her remarkable career to this point. And this really is such a special occasion for you, Moana, and for your whānau, hapu and iwi and many colleagues and collaborators around the nation. And I especially acknowledge your dear whānau here this evening, including your husband, Reuben, and your children. And there are many dignitaries here in the room, including our local Member of Parliament, Rachel Brooking, and Emeritus Professor Richard Bedford, who's past President of the Royal Society, Te Aparangi. So this occasion this evening represents years and years of award-winning research, and as a Ngāpuhi multidisciplinary scholar, Professor Theodore has contributed enormously to new knowledge in this country and internationally. And one of the roles of a university is to help positively transform society, and your work on investigating life course epidemiology, the development of chronic disease and Māori health is exemplary. Your Indigenous Māori health research is at the interface of Western and Indigenous science methods and knowledge systems. It's critical work for this country and is an exemplar for anyone in the world looking for what is possible when we value Indigenous knowledge alongside Western systems of knowledge. I also wish to acknowledge your years of national leadership and governance expertise, and I know many in this room have directly benefited from your thoughtful and careful decision making to make our nation an even better place to work and live in, and I know I personally have too. Professor Theodore, you're breaking new ground and revealing new insights and knowledge about who we are as a country. And as your colleague and dear friend, it is my greatest delight to stand here with you this evening to mark this substantial occasion in your stellar career. And I'm now going to hand over to Professor Richard Barker, our Pro Vice-Chancellor Sciences, to more fully introduce you. So our warm welcome to you all here this evening. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Professor Ruru, tēnā koe. Professor Theodore, tēnā koe. Professors Blakey and Abraham, tēnā korua. Friends and colleagues, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Professor Rera Moana Theodore from the Department of Psychology, to give her inaugural professorial lecture here at the University of Otago. As indicated by Professor Ruru, Moana was promoted to professor in February this year, and tonight we get to celebrate this significant achievement. Born at Middlemore Hospital in Tamaki Makaurau, Professor Theodore commenced her education at Mayfield Primary School in East Tamaki, before progressing to Papatoetoe Intermediate and then Papatoetoe High School. On leaving high school, Moana studied for a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from the University of Auckland, before making her way to the Deep South and studying for her postgraduate diploma in psychology here at Otago. This led to career-defining jobs, first as research assistant on the Early Learning Project at the University of Otago, and then as a research assistant in the Department of Psychology, and then on to Junior Research Fellow in the Dunedin Multidisciplinary Health and Development Research Unit, better known as the Dunedin Study, where she worked as an interviewer. By now captured by her interest in longitudinal studies, Moana headed off for her OE to London. To do what? To spend the final 2 years of the 20th century as a research worker on the ERISC study in King's College at the London Institute of Psychiatry. The ERISC study follows a sample of twins born in the UK between 1994 and 1995, with an initial focus on children's disruptive behaviour and the various risk factors associated with this. So I could see why you wanted to take that one on. Returning from London, Moana undertook her PhD again at the University of Auckland, which she completed in 2006 before returning to what is now her Dunedin home, where she settled into a sequence of research fellow roles with the Dunedin Study and the National Centre for Life Course Research. This included a period as the prestigious Health Research Council Era Hapati Rehu Murchie postdoctoral fellow, which she held in the National Centre for Life Course Research from 2013 to 2015. Moana then resumed her position as a research fellow in the National Centre for Life Course Research, becoming its co-director in 2016 and then director in 2022. In the period from 2016 to 2022, Professor Theodore was the Deputy Director of the Ageing Well National Science Challenge. She was promoted to Senior Research Fellow and then to Research Associate Professor, while also holding a Health Research Council Māori Health Research Emerging Leader Fellowship. And I've deliberately laid all of this out because it tells a remarkable tale of rapid success in spite of the precarity of these roles. And what I haven't yet mentioned is that she also took 3 significant periods of parental leave while studying te reo and te ao Māori through both Otago and te wharewananga o Aotearoa. Despite all of that, tonight we celebrate this remarkable progress from research fellow to full professor in a little over a decade. Professor Theodore's research is multidisciplinary in nature, and she has expertise in life course epidemiology, the development of chronic disease, and Māori health. She is productive. She has 55 papers and 2 chapters published and nearly $5 million in research grants. This grant success includes as a co-leader of Ngā Pai o te Maramatanga, a National Centre of Research Excellence. She's been able to secure an MB Smart Ideas grant along the way, as well as the 2 fellowships that I've already mentioned. Moana has received recognition for the excellence of this work, both personally. She received a National Māori Academic Excellence Award in 2019 and was a finalist for the International Society for Hypertension New Investigator Award in 2012, but also as part of an award-winning team that won the 2022 Rutherford Medal. That was the Dunedin study team, following on from their success in 2016 when they won the Prime Minister's Sciences Prize. As is evident, Moana is a natural leader, and she has now assumed the role as director of the Dunedin study. And in this role, she has the responsibility to continue the remarkable work of her predecessors and to nurture a research taonga that is the fulfilment of the intersecting lifelong visions of 3 extraordinary people: Phil Silver, the late Richie Poulton, and now Moana Theodore. Her willingness to take on these significant leadership roles speaks to Moana's exceptional service ethic, which is also reflected in the various roles in governance and strategic leadership in Māori and Indigenous health and wellbeing research and Matauranga Māori and science. In 2019, Moana was appointed by the Minister of Health to the Southern District Health Board. Between 2019 and 2022, she chaired the board's Disability Support Advisory Committee, launching the first disability strategy for the Southern region, and was a member of the Hospital Advisory Committee. She also held roles as Deputy Chair of the Community and Public Health Advisory Committee and was a member of the COVID-19 Endemic Governance Group overseeing the board's COVID-19 response. Between May and October 2022, Moana joined the university senior leadership team as kaitohu motoraka and representative of the Office of Māori Development. And in this role, she provided critical advice on tikanga Māori and aspects of te ao Māori in advising the Vice-Chancellor and the senior leadership team. She contributed to high-level projects, including our Vision 2040, and in particular the Te Tiriti o Waitangi section, and also the Tuakiritaka rebranding project and the implementation of the Māori Strategic Framework. There is so much more I could continue on with, but you're not here to listen to me. So I will finish on Vision 2040 by noting that Professor Theodore and her work is the very embodiment of this vision. Our people and knowledge transforming lives, connecting communities and nurturing the environment in Otago, Te Waipunamu, Aotearoa, the Pacific and the world. It's now time to hear from Professor Theodore herself, one of our stellar wahine in science here at the University of Otago. Please join me in welcoming Professor Moana Theodore.
Can you hear me up the back? Yeah, okay. Tihei mauri ora, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā raurakatira mā tēnā koutou. Ki ngā mate o te wiki, o te marama o te tau, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Ko kingi tū heitia ki te rangi e moi e te ariki, e te kingi. Ka huri au ki te ao marama, ki te mana whenua, kai tahu whānui, e mihi kau ana ki a koutou, ki a tātou e hui hui mai nei i tēnei pō, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. Well, it's a privilege to be here today, and I never thought I would be here. Firstly, I didn't know where here was when I was growing up, and then once I got here, I didn't actually understand what here did. And then when I did understand more and when I did get a PhD, I never thought I'd make it to professor. My husband Ruben did, I did not. And even after I applied for professor and was promoted, I wasn't sure I'd make it to the inaugural professorial lecture. Such has been the nature of my work that Richard mentioned. A colleague said to me that the nature of these lectures is to talk about the gravitas of one's career and research, and the pinnacle that is to be professor. And I take their point, as traditionally that's what these lectures have been known to do. But for me today, actually, I just really want to give thanks to the people that got me here and the people that have kept me here. And I particularly want to speak to those that were never destined really to be here or weren't supposed to be here. Because when people like myself enter into these spaces, we bring our communities with us and we try to create space for more people like us. And the working class, woman, Māori, and especially if there's a young man out there tonight who thinks this all looks a bit flash, then my story and my journey is for you. And here we are. But in talking about this moment right here, I've gotten ahead of myself, because any life course or longitudinal researcher will tell you that in order to understand what's happening right now, you have to understand the past. So in order to predict the future, we have to understand the history. And as a Māori researcher, that of course fits really well with my own Māori worldviews, which are long-term in nature, from before birth to old age and intergenerationally. Ka mua, ka muri, we walk backwards into the future, we look to the past to inform what lies ahead. And so I'm going to start my lecture by going back in time. So, in order to understand my career and my research, we go back to two small villages nearly a century ago, at opposite ends of Aotearoa. The first village of Waimate North, Haiamai in the Bay of Islands, the location of the first inland mission station and the site of Te Ahuahu War. My Roto Lake or Māpiri feeds my awa or river, Waitangi, which flows to the site where Te Tiriti was signed in 1840. And it was on those riverbanks nearly 19 years ago that my Nana, 18-year-old Nana, was struggling in labour for the first time. The first twin baby boy was born in the evening, but a second, more sickly baby boy was born in the early morning. And that second baby, my dad, was named Tamaramatanga by the kaumātua Tommy Aruna. My dad would also become known as Tom or Tommy as well. And the kaumātua quoted from a text at the time which talked about a time of change for Māori. This was back in the 1930s and 40s. And it said, me āpatia ia te mātauranga o ngā tōhunga Māori ki ngā mātauranga o te aohau o te Pākehā. A person should place side by side the insight of the Māori expert with the knowledge of the new world of the Pākehā. And so despite leaving school at the age of 14, my dad was a firm believer in the power of education to change lives. a belief that would inform my later research in higher education. And Ruben mentioned a whakatauki from the north, ka kata ngā pūriri o Taiamai, which is said at a time of celebration or joyful time that the pūriri trees of Taiamai are laughing. And I know that if my dad was here, he would definitely be celebrating tonight. At the same time that my dad was born, a baby girl was born in Cobden in Greymouth. Similar to my dad, my mum was born into very humble beginnings. A little girl who would lose her father, who came from Edinburgh and whose middle name I share, at the age of 3, and also her beloved mother at the age of 6. My mum would later study to become a primary school teacher and would work in the native schools and then later in South Auckland. My mum on the left. And it was there that I was born in South Auckland, as Richard mentioned, Middlemore Hospital, partly because the impacts of colonisation and the need to find work had affected so many whānau like my own. My nana and pop, Akanihi and Peter Theodore, who are the third and fourth from the left, on right up the top there. Actually, I've been told to use this so people at home can follow along. These two, so Pop and Nana. And my whānau moved to Otara in the late 1960s and 70s, a part of the great urban migration. My grandparents were establishing members of the Ngāti Otara Marae, and my nana started the Otara branch of the Māori Women's Welfare League and was a founding member of the league. She was awarded a QSM and an MBE for her work with young people and their whānau. And in addition to having 14 kids. And so from a young age, I saw through my grandparents and my parents, my aunties and uncles, the importance of community-based work, of whānau order models of health and well-being, and the importance of working with young people in their whānau, things that would, of course, guide my career choice. I would spend my childhood growing up in Otara and Papatoetoe, and although I've proudly lived in Dunedin for nearly 20 years now, my research and my work has been informed by those communities that raised me. Academics would say that I take a social determinants approach to health and well-being. Social determinants being the conditions and environments where people are born, they live, they learn, they work, and they play. But how could I not? Looking back, I would come to understand that social and economic policies and practices would unfairly affect our communities, including our health and well-being. Neoliberal economic reforms in the 80s and 90s that left workers who had flocked to South Auckland for manufacturing jobs suddenly unemployed, resulting in high and inequitable rates of unemployment for the working class and in particular Māori and Pacifica. And then this was followed by social welfare cuts of those newly unemployed, would entrench intergenerational poverty and a number of the health and social issues that a number of us here are working on today. And then, of course, the interpersonal and structural racisms that went through those communities, including the dawn raids within our neighbourhoods. And to counter that, the powerful community responses like the Māori Women's Welfare League, Ngā Tamatoa, Kohanga Reo, that would positively change the shape of Aotearoa forever. It's fair to say that South Auckland is in the house tonight, and it's also online, kia ora, because of a number of people that have travelled here and are watching. It's also fair to say that university was not a straight path for me. And for those who I grew up with, I wouldn't have gone to university. I'm trying to look for my sister. I wouldn't have gone for university if it hadn't have been for my sister, Irina, and my brother-in-law Adam's footsteps. She was the first in our whānau to go to university. And I would enroll there in the early 1990s. But I would begin my research career here. As a research assistant, as Richard said, in the psychology department at Otago Uni. Use the mouse, Moana. In the mid-90s at the Early Learning Project under a young researcher, a young lecturer called Dr. Harleen Hain. The role would ignite my passion and the understanding of the importance of childhood development for later life. And then in late 1997, I applied for an interview job at the age 26 assessments of the Dunedin study. For those who don't know much about this study, it's the country's longest running longitudinal study and considered to be the world's most detailed study of human health and development. following the lives of 1,037 babies that were born between the 1st of April 1972 and the 31st of March 1973 in Dunedin, and still there at age 3. Truly, half a century and counting. Back in late 1997, I clearly remember walking into the old Barningham building to be interviewed by Dr. Phil Silver, the study's founder, and a young Dr. Richie Poulton. I was 23 years old, and that moment would change my life forever. Here's a photo of the age 26 assessment team. I'm here, if you can see that. It's quite a strong back row, actually. There's Barry Milne that's there, Sandhya Ramraka, who's our current research, Dr. Sandhya Ramraka, who's our current, for a long time, research manager at the Dunedin study. I think Shelley's in here as well. You're not at the back with the naughty kid, Shelley, but there you are here, and a number of others. But this was us back in 1998. And at this multidisciplinary leading study, I would learn to examine health from a multidisciplinary perspective. And I was fascinated because not only was I learning about psychology, more about psychology and social science, which I had studied, but also other areas like cardiovascular health, oral health, and respiratory health. The first academic paper I co-authored was about the long-term stability of personality from age 3 to age 26. That was led by Professors Avshalom Caspi and Terry Moffat. I mentioned my mum earlier because we were cleaning out her bookshelf recently, just tidying up, and I found this book of hers from her teacher training days, which reminded me of my talk, looking backwards to look forwards. The study would find that actually children's temperament predicted adult personality more than 20 years later. So for example, children that were seen to be confident when they were 3 would describe themselves as unconventional and more extroverted at 26, and reserved children would grow up to be more introverted, and people would describe them as such. After the age 26 assessments, as Richard said, I worked in the e-risk study in the UK before myself and my husband Ruben would return home in 2001. The same year that my daughter Ripeka was born prematurely at Middlemore Hospital. And so I would quickly learn firsthand about infant and childhood development. Thankfully, Ripeka developed well, and she's a 4th year student here at Otago. But I undertook my PhD study in the early to mid 2000s at the Auckland Birthweight Collaborative Study. All of the children in that particular study were born at term, but half were born small for gestational age. In some ways mirroring my early parenting experience. My PhD would focus on the 7-year follow-up phase when the children were 7. My supervisors were Professors Ed Mitchell, John Thompson, and Karen Mordy, who's here today. I stole this off Facebook. I hope that's okay. Your Facebook. I'm asking now. And what did we find? Well, to cut a long story short, my work would find that the development of babies that were born small, but at term, so 37 weeks and up, and particularly their cognitive development, was no different from the children that were born appropriate for gestational age. So it was good news. Okay. Having finished my PhD and pregnant with my second child, Rupine, we would return to my husband's hometown in Dunedin in 2007. And shortly after arriving, I caught up with Richie and Sandhya out at their home. I remember I had slippers on and a growing belly. And Richie asked me, "Mo, what are you up to now?" And I pointed at my belly, and unperturbed, he said, "Would you like a job?" So 5 months pregnant, I began a postdoc that was funded by the Otago Health Sciences Fellowship that looked at how blood pressure tracked from childhood to adulthood. And it was a chance for me to learn longitudinal trajectory modelling. Shout out to, I don't know if Jono's here, shout out to Jono, who had to painfully sit through that with me and teach me, Jonathan Broadbent. But what we did is what we found, and I'll use the mouse again, is that we were able to track from 7 all the way through to 38 people's blood pressure, and we identified 4 distinct developmental blood pressure groups. There were those that were in the normal, which was about 1/5 of the population. those in the high normal, which was about 44% of the population, pre-hypertensive, about a third of the population, and this hypertensive group, and you can see it starts high and continues to track high of about 4%. What predicted being in those higher risk groups? Having a family history of high blood pressure, being a male, being born first, and low birth weight were associated with being in those high risk groups. Cigarette smoking and having a higher body mass was actually increased blood pressure for everyone, but particularly for those in the higher risk groups. And the higher risk groups were then associated with worse cardiovascular outcomes when they reached 38. What does all this suggest? Well, it suggests the need for prevention and early intervention much earlier in the life course for what are often considered adult chronic diseases. And to follow that up, I would apply my newly found trajectory skills to other Dunedin study papers that I co-authored that had similar findings, and I'm just led by other Dunedin study researchers. This one here looks at body mass index from age 3 all the way through to 38, and we were able to identify 4 distinct development groups as well. And what we found is for those in the higher risk groups, the black and the blue, that they were more likely, they had elevated risk of endothelial dysfunction. What's that? It's a risk factor for cardiovascular health. So that's just one example. The second one is looking at kidney function trajectories, and this is the high risk group actually at the bottom, which if you can see it is about 6% of people. And they were more likely to, so in terms of risk factors, to come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and had other risk factors such as high blood pressure. The take-home message, that what happens to you when you're young, your experiences in the environment you grow up in, has a long-term impact later in life, and that it also actually gets under your skin in terms of your physical health. I would have my third child in 2009 tour, and in addition to the incredible support that I've always had from my Dunedin study colleagues, I sought out support and encouragement as an early career Māori researcher, leading me to Te Poutama Māori, the University Māori Academic Staff Caucus, founded by Jacinta and Janine Kappa, an incredible group, and I would meet many wonderful colleagues. Spending time together, and inevitably I ended up working with some. For example, Professor Lisa Temoringa on issues of obesity for Māori. At Te Poutama, we also talked a lot about issues of being a Māori academic and how few of us there were. Why were there so few Māori professors? Something I'll come back to shortly. In 2013, as mentioned, I was awarded the Eri Hapatirehu Murchie Postdoctoral Fellowship that I titled Te Maramatanga, How Education Positively Affects Māori Health Over Time, named after my late father. My postdoc was undertaken in 2 larger studies, one following Māori university graduates within the graduate longitudinal study. At the graduate study, in my first paper, I say these are always collaborations. Our first paper, we would write about the history of post-compulsory education for Māori from the early 1800s to 2010, and the policies and practices that resulted in the near exclusion of Māori from post-compulsory education until the 60s and 70s, resulting in that Māori working class that I talked about earlier in South Auckland, including in South Auckland. Then using a representative sample of university graduates from 2011, the paper highlighted key differences between Māori and non-Māori university graduates. We found that nearly half of Māori graduates were the first in their family to attend university, as opposed to a third of non-Māori graduates. Half of Māori graduates would study humanities, 70% were female. 1/3 had children of the Māori graduates compared to 20% of non-Māori who were parents. And overall, we found that Māori were underrepresented at that time as graduates at 7%, and particularly as postgraduates at 5.8%, given that Māori made up 15% of the population at the time and are a younger population. In a follow-up survey, we then looked at graduate outcomes 2 years post-graduation. We found that the employment outcomes for Māori, Pacifica, and non-Māori, non-Pacifica were comparable. They were the same in terms of employment rates and in terms of incomes. We did, however, find that Māori and also Pacific graduates had significantly higher student debt and more financial strain post-graduation, which was a carry-on effect from their financial situation pre-study and during their studies. And yet conversely, on the graph on the left, the graph it's on the right here, what this shows is actually what they did out in the community. And what we found was that Māori and Pacifica graduates actually reported higher levels of help and higher levels of volunteerism than their non-Māori, non-Pacific counterparts. So you can see here that they actually, that's Māori there, that's Pacifica, actually lent more money than their non-Māori, non-Pacific counterparts, even though they had less. Were more likely to help with official matters and obviously looking after dependents as well. So what does this research mean overall? Well, what we said was that boosting higher education participation and success for Māori and Pacifica could help to reduce those labour market inequalities that I talked about earlier. And also and would result in private benefits for the graduates, such as better employment and higher income, but it would also result in greater societal benefits in terms of volunteerism, in terms of their participation, and in terms of the support that they give, that Māori and Pacific graduates give back. The second part of my postdoc was working with Te Poutiranga, a Māori community organisation, and the National Centre for Life Course Research that was directed by Richie. A long-term program of research called Te Kura Mai I Tāwhiti. We have some of the team here today, Aro, Gareth, and others watching online, Irina, Rose, Mihi, and Will. And this is a picture of the team. I did not make it into the Taranaki Sporting Hall of Fame. I want to be honest about that. It's a great place to take a photo though. So this is the awesome team here. Te Poutiranga, our partner, are the governance group for Te Kōpai Piripono, our Māori early childhood education centre in Taranaki. The research collaboration began in 2010, and at the time the Te Kōpai whānau had completed their successful research as a Ministry of Education Centre of Innovation, exploring leadership and whānau development. And the Dunedin study had just completed their work on self-regulation in early childhood and its importance. Self-regulation is things like having persistence, delaying gratification, and what the study would find that was really important even for health outcomes in adulthood. With a number of shared goals, we embarked on an incredible journey, and there have been many findings from the Te Kura Mai I Tāwhiti team over the years. Jacinta talked about this a little bit before in terms of the methodological approaches our team has used. So an important part of the methodological approach that we take is using an interface approach. What does that mean? Our research takes place at the interface between mātauranga Māori and Western science. And we accept that there's going to be some differences there at the philosophical level. But we relocate the tension in some of that to the kaupapa rangaho, or the methodological level. Echoing the words of that kaumātua more than 90 years ago, that a person should place side by side the insight of the Māori expert with the knowledge of the new world of the Pākehā. Ka mua, ka muri. Doctors Aro Tamati and Irina Hon-Flavel have led numerous studies in this project, resulting in groundbreaking PhDs that you see here on the screen. Use that for the people watching at home. And they've kindly allowed me to present on some of that research that we did today. For Aro's work, He Piki Raukura, we examined the positive impacts that kaupapa Māori early life programs can have on tamariki. What were those positive things that we examined? Through wānanga, there was 4 constructs of interest that were identified. Tuakiri, probably can't see that. Oh no, it's not too bad up there. Tuakiri, having a secure local Māori identity. Whānauranga, feeling and acting as a member of the whānau community. Manuaroa, having persistence and courage in adversity. And piripono, having integrity, commitment and responsibility to a shared purpose or kaupapa. There is a serious lack of Māori-specific research on child development. So not only did the team and Aroaro lead it had to come up with identify the constructs, also had to create the measurement tools to then measure them, and then look at whether or not kaupapa Māori programs were having a positive impact on them longitudinally. And I think we've had this discussion before. We hate to reduce all of that work to one graph, but I have. Sorry, Aroaro. And what you can see, and this is one of the measures, is that you can see significant positive change in all of those constructs over time when we measured it in preschool children over 5 data points in a 1-year period, showing positive change, even for a short period of time. And that work is now being extended out across the country, supported by the HRC and MB. So watch this space. And of course, kaupapa Māori early childhood programs don't just affect the tamariki that are enrolled, they impact on the whole whānau. And so Irina's PhD, Tangi Ana Te Kawe Kawea, examined what impacted whānau from wanting to engage in programs that clearly were having this type of success. And she found that whānau engaged because they wanted their children to gain fluency in te reo and tikanga and a secure Māori identity. There were factors that impacted positively and negatively whether or not whānau wished to engage: colonisation, emotional responses, whānau connection, institutional features, cultural identity and socioeconomic status. And she found much more. And unfortunately, I can't go into it today. But both of these PhDs, I can spot a number of psychology people in the audience, and their related journal articles are must-reads in the field of Aotearoa child research. Photos. In 2016, Richie would ask me to become co-director of the National Centre of Life Course Research. It's a centre that partnered with longitudinal researchers and studies across the country with a focus of impacting on policy and practice. Some question why he would put an early career researcher into a position of leadership, but he was resolute. And so became my formal academic leadership training. And I'll give a shout out to the Academic Leadership Development Program too, and Alison Stewart, who helped me with that. My first co-directorship task, was to reapply for centre status and funding. And it involved me travelling around the country to meet with colleagues, including those at the Christchurch Health and Development Study, and James and Joe are here today, and the Pacific Islands Family Study. There is this misconception out there that we're competitors, these longitudinal studies, but I have only ever found incredible support from other longitudinal researchers, given that we're also passionate about these studies being the best kind of studies there are. And alongside growing up in New Zealand, we're actually hugely proud that New Zealand are world leaders in this area. And I'm particularly excited about the future work that the Dunedin and Christchurch studies are going to be doing together under the banner of Otago Longitudinal Research. Another part of the co-directorship role that would change me personally and my career forever was establishing the Centre's advisory group, a group chaired by the wonderful Emeritus Professor Richard Bedford. The group included Her Excellency, the Governor-General, and my cousin, Dame Cindy, kia ora Jimmy, and Professor Cliff Abraham. And I couldn't have asked for better advisors and mentors that would gently but firmly force me to often face the hard questions and not always take the easy road, but take the road and the best road in order to do what we could and ensure that the research that we were doing were going to have an impact on people, in particular those most in need. It was a crash course in leadership, and all three remain mentors of mine to this day, and obviously alongside Richie, who was my first and longest academic mentor. They've fundamentally shaped me. In 2017, Professor David Baxter, asked me to become Deputy Director of the Ageing Well National Science Challenge at a time when the challenge was strategically planning its second 5 years and how to invest tranche 2 of its funding. Working with the Ageing Well team and alongside 2 of my wonderful long-term colleagues, Dr. Will Edwards and Associate Professor Andrew Spall, we would undertake consultation around the country with Māori to identify Māori ageing priorities. I'm incredibly proud that the Ageing Well Challenge would then support, by using approximately half of the contestable funding from Tranche 2, Māori ageing projects and Māori researchers. But in 2018, I was awarded an inaugural HRC, Māori Health Research Emerging Leader Fellowship, it's quite the mouthful, and I would lead the Deputy Directorship to an incredible wahine toa and friend, Professor Louise Parr Brownlee, who would inevitably become the Ageing Well Director. And I would begin my HS Fellowship, which continued on the work that I've already talked about, that research. But it wasn't too long afterwards that I put my name forward for a role as a counsellor on the Royal Society Te Aparangi, a role that I held for 3 years. Working alongside my fellow counsellor and mate, Professor Melinda Webber, who I think is watching this from the far north, and other wonderful counsellors and incredible Royal Society staff, including Tara Nekora and Kahu Hotere, we pushed within the Society for greater recognition of mātauranga Māori and more diverse forms of research excellence. There is no way to solve the wicked world problems that we face or truly support flourishing futures in Aotearoa if we as academics take narrow, discipline and Eurocentric views. And I am most proud of from that time as an initiative that we all undertook that resulted in 12 Māori Fellows being appointed in the year 2020. We had the celebration in 2021, resulting in the near doubling of the number of living Māori Fellows in the Society, a team effort working alongside Ngā Pae o Te Maramatanga. And I want to particularly mention Professor Angus McFarlane, who deftly actually drove that initiative through the implementation within the Society's academic executive. Okay. Furthering my governance career, I take a role as a ministerial appointed member of the Southern District Health Board. Our first meeting was in February 2020. And I thought, I'm going to give myself a few months to learn people's names, some of the acronyms, work out where things were, the meeting rooms. But it was at that month's finance audit and risk meeting we would hear more about a coronavirus called COVID-19 and the far-reaching impacts that it might and then inevitably had. Earlier I spoke about the community initiatives that I saw growing up, and it was again in that role that I saw community strength, resilience, know-how and can do, with wonderful leaders like Gilbert Taurua, who got resource out to communities and worked on the ground to support grassroots solutions. My fellow board member and mate Tuari Portaki would also voluntold me to take a role chairing the board's Statutory Disability Support Advisory Committee and inevitably deputising the Community Public Health Advisory Committee. There I would see the incredible work of disability leaders and experts in the launching of the first disability strategy of the region, their work supported by the Donald Beasley Institute. And I'm forever grateful to have served under the late, great David Cole, who prioritised mana whenua relationships here in Ōtepoti, and also to take a crash course in getting things done by his successor, the Honourable Pete Hodgson. Tuari would also ask me in 2022 to take a short-term position at the Office of Māori Development, working with the incredible team there. My role was to liaise with the Vice-Chancellor, at the time Professor David Murdoch, and the senior leadership team, which involved in attending leadership team meetings and advocating on behalf of OMD. I saw the incredible work that was being done on the Tuakiritaka project and Vision 2040, a document that would place Te Tiriti as a strategic priority of the highest order in this university. Research did remain a priority, I promise, as well, and in an incredible collaboration with wahine toa and formidable and passionate Professor Joanna Kidman, Doctors Tara McAllister and Siriana Naiapi, alongside my long-suffering, that is suffering from working with me, and wonderful colleague, the genius that is Jessie Kokawa. Despite years of challenging leaders within our universities, things were not changing in terms of Māori staff numbers. I talked about that a bit earlier. And our work helped to provide quantitative evidence to show severe underrepresentation and inequities that would support other people's long-term work in this area. The Why Isn't My Professor Māori, and Siriana led the Why Isn't My Professor Pacifica paper, showed that in a 5-year period between 2012 and 2017, Māori made up less than 5% of the total academic workforce and less than 4% of professors, and that had not changed over time. Then the Glass Ceilings paper, where we used data from more than 17,000 academics, shout out again to Jessie, and found that Māori and Pacific men and also women academics, when compared to non-Māori, non-Pacific male academics, had significantly lower odds of being an associate professor or professor, of being promoted to the professoriate, associate professor and professor, and had lower earnings. And importantly, that these differences were not explained by their research performance, their age, or field. And our modelling showed that these inequities would either persist or increase over time unless something changed. Māori and Pacific women earn nearly $18,000 less per year than non-Māori, non-Pacific men, and had a 65% lower odds of being promoted to the professoriate over a 15-year period. So, but it was last year that Richie would ask me to direct the Dunedin study. The cancer that he had been living with had progressed, and this was to be his last act as my mentor. Supported by the study's governance group, led by the incomparable Laura Black, which included Cliff, Professors Richard Blakey, Jamin Haldestad and Richard Barker, who was relentless in supporting me to take this role. And it's a role that I feel deeply privileged and honoured to have, directing this world-leading and very proudly also Dunedin-based study. I couldn't have asked for a better team, and here they are, up on screen, of highly committed long-term staff who, despite suffering a tremendous loss when we lost Richie in September last year, were determined to push forward with the age 52 assessments that we started in April. I remember many meetings last year with Sandra and Sean, Kirsten, Ashley, David, Hannah, Cliff, and Marissa, and then Cody and Tony joining, and others like Linda. Here's the team photo, including a number of research investigators, some I see here tonight, and other folk who do so much to help us and support us in the background, people like Kate Barrard and Jacinta Taylor. There are too many to name, but thank you all. In terms of the science, now that I'm director, people often ask me, what do I consider to be the most important findings from the study? And that's a really tough call. There's been 1,400 reports in a wide range of areas, with findings that have impacted on policy and practice worldwide in areas like early childhood education, reducing childhood poverty, oral health. It goes on and on. There's two findings that stand out for me. One on the long-term impacts of child poverty, finding that children that are born in socioeconomically disadvantaged families suffer from poor health when they reach adulthood, so into midlife, even if their situation improves as they get older. So even if we see that upward mobility. A finding that resonates with the experiences that I described earlier in the neighbourhoods that I grew up in. There's a second finding, and I think it speaks a lot to what it is to be humans, and that is our findings on mental health. In particular, that by the time the study members had reached the age of 45 years of age, 86% of them reported having had at least one diagnosable mental health condition. That doesn't mean that they were treated, but that means that they reported it. And you can see the high rates here of lifetime prevalence. And just to show comparability, those are the Christchurch rates as well. Why so high? Well, because we ask over time, so people don't have to remember, and we've asked since they were 11. And those mental health conditions, this is a busy graph, but I'll slowly walk us through it. It's cool though, it looks good. It's called a Sankey graph. These mental health conditions include internalizing conditions like anxiety and depression, externalizing like alcohol and drug dependence, and thought disorders. It conveys three things if I can get them across. One is that just because a person has a condition at one stage in their life, say an eating disorder when they're an adolescent, that they won't necessarily have it throughout life. And then if they do suffer from another mental health condition later in life, it might be something completely different. You can see the waves. Those are the waves coming in and out. The second, though, is that people that have mental health conditions early in life are more likely to have them for longer and more likely to have more. And that speaks back to that point about the need for prevention and early intervention and the need for youth mental health services as well. The third thing, if you look at the top of the graph, you can see that that darker green area gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it's only 1 in 10 people that haven't reported a diagnosable mental health condition in their lifetime. What does it mean? Okay, I won't get you to raise your hand if you're the 1 in 10 that hasn't. I don't want to make this awkward, but what does it mean? It means that no one gets through this life unscathed, and it should beget compassion for our fellow human beings. Life's not easy. And we know from the science that we do at the Dunedin study, we know it's world leading, but the team knows as well it's a deeply human study. Sean, our cohort manager, has described the study as seeing through the lens of 1,000 lives, as did Richie. The tragedies and the triumphs, the highs and the lows. I meet with study members and I ask them why they participate. These exchanges can be lighthearted and humorous. They can also be deeply profound. A study member said to me that a life worth living is a life worth recording. Others have called this work their legacy, their contribution to humanity, that they want to make a difference and they want to make it better for their children and their grandchildren, that they want to help solve the questions, our big questions on health and aging. Many will say, I've just always done it and I'll just keep on doing it as long as you'll have me. They selflessly participate without reward, describing themselves as anonymously famous or the famous baby society. What I also love about the study is that each and every study member is important as the person sitting next to them, regardless of what their perceived status is out in society and how society treats them as they walk back out those doors. We see more than 90% of study members, which means we see people from all walks of life. And I also love that the Dunedin community has held and uplifted this study for half a century. Thank you. Very similar to those community initiatives I saw growing up. There's a saying that you cannot bad relationship your way to good data. It is only through good relationships that you get good data. And that's why our study values are so important. We treat people as we would want to be treated. So the study members are the true heroes of this study. Secondly, in order to understand human lives, we must take a multidisciplinary and equity-based approach. We strive for research excellence in all we do, and that is we take a very broad definition of what that means in terms of excellence. And finally, and importantly, that the gift that these study members have given for half a century has to make a difference in the lives of others. That's what they ask us to do, and that's what we work to do. Okay. I'm going to end my speech in two ways after I've adjusted my korowai. Firstly, I want to say some more thank yous. I've already given a few shout outs, but I'm going to say some more. Again, I'd like to thank the team and the researchers and the non-researchers that I've worked with, past and present. Ruben, I would not be the person that I am today. He looked up. He sat to attention then. Good work. I would not be the person that I am today, nor would I be here without your unwavering love and encouragement. He aroha kore whakamutanga ki a koe. Ripeka, my smart, strong eldest child. Rupane, my smart, fascinating middle child. And Tor, my smart and passionate youngest child. Aroha nui ki a koutou. This work is for you. I've already mentioned a number of people. There's still more to mention. The Theodore and Theodore whānau watching online, the Kent family, Heather and the kids watching at home. Kia ora to the Yanes and Flores whānau, I've spotted you there. My in-laws here in Dunedin, we say Mama and Nana Sally, but Glenda Skipper and Sally Parker and Glenda made this beautiful korowai that I'm wearing today. And my late father-in-law, Jeb Skipper, who is here. And the skipper, we are poor whānau up north. I have friends online and those here today, including Hina and Andrea. Thank you for uplifting me and holding me down. Someone advised me that if I was going to say something that would make me cry, to leave it till the end. Wise advice. So I'd like to dedicate this lecture to someone who had planned to attend today but can no longer travel. My best friend Tina, who I've known since I was 11. Tina, we've walked through many fires together and now we walk through this fire. You know all parts of me, so you know that I like a good meme. And I saw one recently that reminded me of you. It said, you clapped so loudly for my accomplishments that I didn't notice that others weren't clapping. I want to send love today to you, to Bruce, Bailey, Jude, and the family watching online. I love you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank God for you. You've been the wind beneath my wings. Finally, to the future. It goes without saying that the Dunedin study is committed to keeping the study going for as long as the study members keep coming in. And they've told us they want to participate until they die. At age 52, we are focusing more and more on ageing in order to understand and better support everyone to age well, including reducing inequities in age-related conditions. As for the future more generally, I look towards the year 2040, 200 years since the signing of Te Tiriti, and I think about the type of country that I want for my children and grandchildren and those still to come. And then I look to the past, my ancestors who signed on the day in 1840, and my dad, who I talked about earlier, who was a 5-year-old at the 100-year celebrations at Waitangi in 1940. And I reflect on the words of the late Kingi Tuheitia, who said, we need to focus on getting in the waka and working together. Growing together is crucial. We've come a long way as a country, and we can go even further. Let's not give up now. The treaty provides a foundation for us all to work together. There is much work still to be done, taking learnings from the past as we forge into the future. Ka mua, ka muri, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Do
going to switch off my mic so I'm not the loudest singer. If I can find it. I'll just switch off my mic. I'm just going to switch off my mic.
Tēnā koutou. Ko Aroaro Tāmati tōku ingoa. My name is Aroaro, and I'm very privileged to be able to say something small, something to add to the kōrero of Moanas in terms of the Māori community, Western science, mātauranga Māori, interface approach that I can add to that little bit. But in doing so, I believe it honours all that Moana has done and is going to do, because we're working together. I first met Moana in 2011 through Richie. And a year earlier, Richie and I had been appointed to the Ministerial Review of Early Childhood. And at that time, Moana rightly recalled that that major finding around self-control, self-regulation had just come out. A key question that Richie and others were pondering at the time was, could you teach self-control? And so in the time that I was working with Richie on the Ministerial Review, he found out a little bit about our community organisation, Te Kōpai Piripono, which is a kaupapa Māori early years education setting. What I didn't realise is that, how fast his brain would work. He fast-forwarded to basically one comment to me, which is, we've got to work together, we've got to do some research together. And I was going, yeah, sure, that's cool. So fast forward about, I'm going to say a few months, and all of a sudden we were presenting at the Intervention Symposium in Wellington in 2011, and that was where I met Moana for the first time. However, the interesting thing is that even though I'd just met her, I actually knew her very well, because Richie talked about her so much. And actually, it was more than talked about her. It was, he had such a high regard for you, Moana. And so when I actually met Moana, I was in awe of her, because she was this very high person in my books, and I hadn't even embarked on any PhD study or anything at that time. So, I was thinking, scary, cool, wahine Māori. This is awesome. Koi, mohio, marama. Engari he whakaro nui. He aroha nui ki te tangata. And a scholar. Focused on excellence, and also in that, quantitative research space that we've all, in this collaboration of Te Kura Mai Tawhiti, been exposed to. Thank you, Jessie. So, Te Kōpai Piripono, we started our research together, and what emerged was Te Kura Mai Tawhiti. The key thing about the interface approach, which we actually learned as we went along, is that we just got on with it. It wasn't anyone was better or higher than anybody else. It was that we had work to do, and let's do it. It was actually a dynamic collaborative effort. It was, we never operated as two different organisations working together on a research project. We operated sort of like a whānau. It was a powerful collaboration. It was high trust. It was respect, and it was aroha all rolled into one. Every colleague brought together their knowledge, skill and expertise, but there was humility. We had challenging conversations. But what happened out of that, and is still happening, because we're at the end point of our data collection of our full study, which involves, as Moana said, centres around the country, it's creating exciting new knowledge. Importantly, there was a negotiation and navigation of power in that conversation. That has been the bedrock of our research, and I would say interface research, that's the bedrock of interface research between Western science and mātauranga Māori. But Moana, can I say, the esteem that we hold you in, our little Māori community organisation, ourselves, I'm so proud and humbled to be able to stand and say something to you and be able to mihi to you tonight. Our relationship goes far beyond trust and beyond academic endeavour, research endeavour. Like what we actually have an extended whānau in the room. We've got Sandia, we've got Priyanka, Ruben, Ripeka, Rupene, Toa, we've got Sam, Gareth. You know, like we've visited each other's homes, we've spent time, we've shared kai, we've had conversation and lots of laughter. I'm just appreciative of all of the work and the guidance that you've given me personally on my journey. So I want to mihi to you. So it has been a privilege and an honour to be able to stand here and to know you. And long may that continue. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koe te maraikura. Rangatira wahine. Mauri ora ki a koe. Kia kaha kia maa kia toa i tō huarahi ki te hāpai i ngā mahi a ngā mātua tūpuna. Tēnā koe, tēnā koe, tēnā hoki koe.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Cliff Abram toko ingoa. Hello everyone, my name is Cliff Abram. I'm here to represent the Department of Psychology, Te Tare Whakamato Hinakaro, in this wonderful proceedings. It's actually been, I'm here on behalf of Jamin Halberstadt, who's head of department. Unfortunately, he can't be here, but he sends his best wishes and for this wonderful event. Sorry he can't be here. But he is proud to be the head of department of the best department of psychology in the Motu. Just saying, completely unbiased observation that Moana makes such a great contribution to, and that's part of the reason. Now, it's been about 20 years since I was head of department, so I haven't done this for a while. So I'm going to get out my cheat sheet just to make sure I get through everything. Well folded. So, first of all, Aro Aro, Namihi Nui, thank you so much for your words. Very beautiful thoughts there. And of course, thank you, Moana, for your excellent and deeply inspiring lecture. I'll come back to that more in a moment. But I just want to recap some of the things that you've heard already, maybe add a little bit more, because I am speaking with the lens of the Department of Psychology. So we can go back to your doing a diploma, postgrad diploma of arts quite some time ago. But also, she was cutting her teeth there shortly after at the Dunedin study as a researcher, junior researcher. You had no idea what you were what that was going to mean. But since then, and after completing her PhD and coming back from the UK, she's played an increasingly important role in the life of the department. As you've heard, as a co-investigator of the Dunedin study, both before and after it transferred to the department, as a collaborator of many staff in the department, as a mentor of many early career researchers, bringing her deep knowledge of Te Ao Māori and Mātauranga Māori to the department, as a promoter of equity for Māori, and as a supporter of longitudinal research efforts right across the Motu through her role as co-director of the National Center of Life Course Research. I will say that work is not done. We need more of that still going forward. And how you have also found time to undertake governance roles at the SDHB, the Aparangi, Aging Well, other entities, actually is a mystery to me. But this speaks not just to her mysterious ways, but to her energy, her devotion to excellence, and her drive to make a difference for Aotearoa through research and policy. Now, promotion professor is not just about excellence. According to the rule book, it's about sustained, outstanding leadership and competence across teaching, research, and service. So that's the bar for this promotion. And I think you would agree that this has been well encapsulated by her presentation today. And thank you, Moana, for sharing with us your journey with such clarity and passion. All of us here have no doubt that you have soared above that bar in the Olympics of academia. Personally, I've known Moana for quite a long time, but very much increasingly so in the last few years, actually, in recent years, such that I now consider her a great friend. And first of all, it's through my own connection with the National Center of Life Course Research, and then my increasing connection with the Dunedin study. Taking on the directorship of the Dunedin study is no small step, I can tell you, and not one to be taken lightly, and not just by anyone. So speaking for myself, but more importantly on behalf of all her national and international colleagues of the department. Oh, by the way, hello everybody who's zooming in, national colleagues, international colleagues, I know you're there, for the department, and particularly on behalf of the wonderful study participants. We are in equal parts thrilled, honored, and indebted to you for taking on this role. It's hard to think of anyone else so well qualified and able to do the job, and that's a fact. I should note that taking this step gave Moana about 6 weeks to write two, not one, but 2 HRC grant applications to gain funding for the phase as it's currently running and beyond. And watching this unfold took me back about 40 years to when I decided to take 6 weeks to train for the Oslo Marathon. I finished, but just about limping across the line. Moana, on the other hand, you've been winning. And what a huge achievement that is in such a short space. Kamui, walking backwards into the future. It's an appropriate perspective given Moana's whakapapa and her enmeshment in and leadership of a longitudinal study that's been 50 years in the making. But don't be fooled. Like any good mom, she has eyes in the back of her head. So while she's looking backwards, she's looking equally well forward into the future. And she's envisioning and now implementing how the study can evolve to increase its ability to address equity for Maori and Pacifica and those with disabilities. He tonga ranganui te araha ki te tangata. Goodwill towards others is a precious treasure. This is something that I know is ingrained in how Moana approaches her roles. So, to our own treasure, thank you for your address today. And congratulations on your promotion. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Song Turiane. So just wait for everyone to come down. So join in if you know it to support our amazing one hand tour.
I hope you see how much your department loves you. So to finish off, we have a small gift to give you to acknowledge your achievement. So that just leaves me to invite you to the aftermatch, which is going to be held at the staff club just across the road for some kai me ino. So hope to see you there and can carry on conversations and continue congratulating Moana. Ngā mihi nui.